welcome back to the Weekly Cafe 4th grade. It's Miss Pickens here, and I hope you had a beautiful 3-day weekend. Today our lesson is going to be all about inferences, and there's no better way to learn about inferences than through characterization. So how do we describe a character in a text? All you're going to need today is your notebook, your pencil or pen, and undivided attention. I cannot wait to teach you. Let's get started. I have a huge shout out. These are the following students who did really well on the article What a Pro Knows. Jesus scored a beautiful 81%. Liliani scored an 88%. Jamira scored a 100%. Jackie scored a 100%. Quadir received a 4 out of 4 on his open-ended question. Naeem wrote 1 full paragraph for the open-ended question, which is amazing because I've been pushing students to write at least a paragraph. And for reaching new heights, Jackie scored 100% on the assignment. These are the highest scores in all of Penn State and Dartmouth. So shout out to everybody whose name is on this list. You may be asking, Miss Pickens, why are we practicing inferences again? Aren't we already masters at making inferences? Well, you guys are brilliant at making inferences, but there's no harm in continuing to sharpen your skills. Good readers become great readers through practice and experience. In this lesson, we will use inferences to describe a character. This is called characterization. We can use this skill in the real world too. When we encounter people and want to describe their personality or their traits, we use background knowledge with information we already know about that particular person to characterize an individual. Thus, our objective for today reads, students will be able to draw inferences from the text to help characterize a protagonist by pairing what they read with background knowledge. Let's take a second to deconstruct this objective. The first word that is highlighted is draw. We know that draw does not literally mean draw a picture, but to make. So let's reread the objective with this new synonym. Students will be able to make inferences from the text to help characterize a protagonist by pairing what they read with background knowledge. The next word that is highlighted is characterize. To characterize is how you describe the personality of someone. So say for instance, someone is always cracking jokes or always making people around them laugh. We would call this person funny or humorous. Those are the words we use to describe the personality. A protagonist is the main character or subject of the text. As you get older, you'll come across more than one protagonist in a story. Say for instance, if you read Harry Potter, you know Harry Potter is a protagonist, but so are his 2 friends, Hermione and the other guy, I forget his name. These 3 characters are main characters. These are our focus when we read. And then last but not least, the word pairing. When we say pairing, we mean putting together information from the text plus our background knowledge. That's how we make a new idea. So in order for us to characterize or come up with character traits for our main character or subject of the text, we have to put together some information from the text plus background knowledge about, character traits. This will help us form new ideas about the personalities that we are reading. 4 main steps that we can take to help us characterize using inferences. I'm going to model these steps for you with an article that you're going to read for homework Tuesday night. The first step is to figure out what is the character doing, thinking, or saying. Step 2 is to figure out how is the character feeling. For this part, you may have to do a little bit of inferencing, whereas the first part is just going into the text and finding explicit, meaning things that are literally said in the text to show what the character is doing, thinking, or saying. Step 3, how would you describe this character? What adjectives or traits would you use? There's a word bank that I added to Clever to help you come up with some different synonyms or some different words to describe a character. And then last but not least, step 4. Put the clues from the text and your background knowledge together to help you characterize. Before we dive in further, I want to go over a few other things. Don't forget that explicit meaning is what the text literally says. That's the information directly from the text. So when we do step 1, right, that would be more explicit. We're looking for things the text literally says. Whereas implicit meaning is your own background knowledge to help you form that new idea. It's what you must read in between the lines, and it's not as obvious. So when we do step 2 and step 3, we may have to do a little bit of implicit digging, meaning the text may not tell us directly how a character is feeling or how we should describe a character, but we have to use our own background knowledge to help us create that meaning. That is the difference between explicit and implicit. Let us now practice together. Let's use steps 1 through 4 to help us make a characterization using inferences from the article, "Sometimes a Dream Needs a Push." Remember that characters change. How they are characterized in the beginning of a story can be completely different by the end. For this story, let's characterize the dad in the beginning of the story. Sometimes a Dream Needs a Push by Walter Dean Myers. Step 1 to figuring out how to characterize a character using inferences is to figure out what the character does, says, or thinks. I'm going to read part of this. I'm not going to read the whole story for you because I want you to try some of this on your own to see if the dad's character changes from the beginning to the end, but I will go over just the beginning. So as I read this article, maybe just the first few paragraphs, I'm going to highlight anything he says, does, or thinks, and I'm going to annotate it. So please take notes so that you can do this on your own. Let's start at the top. You might have heard of my dad, Jim Blair. He's 6'5" and played a good year of basketball in the pros before tearing his knee up in the second year. Pause. I'm going to highlight the fact that he was a good basketball player in the pros and that he tore his knee in the second year. So this is an action. The knee took forever to heal and was never quite the same again. Still, he played pro ball in Europe for 5 years before giving it up and becoming an executive with a high-tech company. Again, he ended up giving up his dream of playing and he ended up becoming an executive. So here's another action. All right, so this, if I'm saying think, say, do, this is something that he does. Dad loved basketball and hoped that one day I would play the game. All right, so this is a thought, right? We know how he feels. He loves the game, and then he thought his son would play one day. So this is a thought. He taught me a lot and was pretty good, and I was pretty good until the accident. Again, this is an action. He's teaching his son. It was raining and we were on the highway approaching the turnoff toward our house in Hartsdale when a truck skidded across the road and hit our rear bumper. Our little car spun out off the road, squealing as Dad tried to bring it under the control. All right, so here I'm going to highlight what the dad is doing during this accident, and this is an action. But he couldn't avoid the light pole. I remember seeing the broken windows, hearing Mom yelling, amazingly bright lights flashing crazily in front of me. Then everything was suddenly dark. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. There were surgeries and weeks in the hospital, but the important thing was that I was not going to be walking again. I didn't like the idea, but Mom and I learned to live with it. Dad took it hard, real hard. He was never much of a talker, Mom said, but he talked even less since I was hurt. All right, so here's an action, right? And I'm actually going to say that this is a thought too, right? Because we know that he took that accident really hard. So that's showing us, right, that this is how he's thinking about the accident, and that he even stopped speaking after it. Sometimes I think he blames himself, Mom said. Whenever he sees you in the wheelchair, he wants to put it out of his mind. I hadn't thought about that when Mr. Evans, an elder in our church, asked me if I wanted to join a wheelchair basketball team he was starting. We won't have the experience of the other teams in the league, he said, but it'll be fun. When I told Mom, she was all for it, but Dad just looked at me and mumbled something under his breath. So here's an action and a saying, right? So he may not say much, he may not say words, but it's a sound. So we're going to say action and saying. This is something that he said. He does that sometimes. Mom said that he's chewing up his words to see how they taste before he lets them out. All right, so I'm going to pause there because remember, you're going to do the rest of this for homework. But now I want to go in and take a look at step 2. Step 2 is to figure out how someone is feeling. So remember, step 1 was all explicit meaning, what the text literally says. We went in, we annotated what action, what thought, or anything that the character said, right? That's all explicit. Now we're going to do the implicit work, meaning we have to read in between the lines because the text isn't necessarily going to tell us the answer. This is where some of our inferencing comes in. Because remember, an inference is information from the text plus background knowledge equals this new idea. So let's go in, let's take a look at what we've highlighted and see if we can come up with any feelings that the dad might have. Let's start here. It was a year of good basketball in the pros before he tore his knee. So we know that maybe in the beginning when he was playing, he may have felt really great or jubilant. Jubilant means happy. But then he tore his knee. So that could have really devastated him because he was not sure, right, about whether or not he could still play. So tore his knee and felt devastated. And remember, devastated is $1 million word for feeling like completely helpless or sad or lost about this situation. Pro ball in Europe for 5 years before giving up and becoming an executive with a high-tech company, right? So he gave up his dream of playing basketball. How might you feel if you had to settle for something because you hurt yourself and gave up your dream, right? You may feel really depressed. You may feel really discouraged. You may feel really defeated. These are all words we could use to express how the dad may feel having to give up this dream of his. But we know that the dad loved basketball and he hoped that one day he could play the game again, or that his son could play. So he taught him a lot. Let's take a minute and let's look at that. He loved the game. That's the feeling. He loved basketball. And then when he had a son, he assumed that the son would play one day too. So maybe he was feeling that his son would carry the legacy of playing basketball. And we know this because his actions were to teach him everything that he knew until this accident, right? So his son's job pretty much is to live the dream that the dad never got to finish living, which is a high order. Like that's a really big burden to put on a child, but this was what the dad is thinking. So it was raining, they're on their highway, they're approaching, and then the car spins off. The dad tries to bring it under his control. This is really interesting. I want to edit this annotation. If you're a father and your main job is to protect your family and you get into this car accident because you couldn't bring the car under control, you may be feeling a tad bit powerless, right? In this moment, he doesn't have the power to stop the car. He may be feeling like a failure as a father to protect the family from danger. And again, these are things that are out of his control. He may be feeling, again, pretty defeated by the fact that he couldn't protect his family. It says here, Dad took it hard. He took this idea of this real hard. It was never much of a talker, but he talked even less since I was hurt. So how might you think he feels if he's not speaking, right? Even less now after the accident. How might he feel? Maybe he feels responsible, right? Like he's the one to blame for his son's accident. And that's huge to feel that sense of burden. I'm going to add the word burden. Burden meaning he's carrying all of this weight of feeling responsible for his son on his shoulders. Dad just looked at me and mumbled something under his breath. How might he be feeling when his son wants to play basketball but wants to play it in a wheelchair, right? So if he's mumbling something under his breath, he has an opinion, but he doesn't feel comfortable expressing it. So uncomfortable. Can't type today. Uncomfortable expressing his opinions, right? He may also be feeling really serious. And when you guys get to high school, you'll be using this word a lot. So I'm just going to throw it in here now because you might as well learn while you're still young. Melancholy, which is like very, very sad tone, right? It's like a deep sadness, not quite depression, but a lingering sadness. So really melancholy. All right. So I don't know why they just like completely vanished, but that happens sometimes when you're annotating with technology. So we went in, we did step 1 and step 2. Now it's time to figure out what words we could use to describe overall his personality. So here's a moment where you can pause this, go onto Clever, upload that word bank that I listed as a link, take a look through it and see if you can find any words to describe his personality in the beginning. Let's see if the words you come up with match mine. Go ahead, go look for some words. Step 3 asks, what words describe the dad in the beginning of the story? After you've taken a minute to look at your word bank and maybe gone back to look at the story because you've annotated along with me, so looking at those notes, you probably came up with a few different character traits for him, just for the beginning of the story. Here are a few that I came up with. See if you agree. Hopeless, especially when that car was swerving. Serious. Defeated, especially when he blew out his knee and could no longer play basketball, or when he taught his son and now his son can't really play basketball like he had hoped he could in the same capacity that he did in the past. Powerless, doubtful, or depressed. So here are a few different words we could use to describe the dad in the beginning. Your job, again, is to go and try this on your own for the middle and the end of the story and see if some of these words start to change. Does hopeless become hopeful? Does powerless become powerful? Does depressed start looking like happy? Does defeated start feeling or looking like winning? Does doubtful start becoming prideful or proud? And does serious change to curious or thoughtful? These are some of the things you should think about. And then step 4, if you don't remember, means to just go back and wrap it all up. How does the information from the text help solidify some of the character traits that you've used or come up with in step 3? And this is be a moment where you take a minute, go back and look at those annotations that we did on Common Lit and pair them with some of the words you came up with on your own for step 3. Work together to characterize the dad in the beginning of the story, I want you to try to do the rest on your own. I would like you to characterize him in the middle and the end of the story. Use the 4 steps presented in this lesson and the characterization word bank on Clever. Does the dad change at all? How does he change from the beginning of the story to the end? What makes him change? Think about step 1. What does he say, think, or do to show that he has changed? Maybe before he wouldn't say much about basketball, and now he finds himself helping coach the students on the team. What does his actions show about maybe his change of heart or how he's feeling now versus how he felt in the beginning of the story? This will be your task on your own for homework. I know you guys worked really hard for this lesson, so I'm really excited to see how you're going to do for homework this week. On Tuesday, I want you guys to read Sometimes a Dream Needs a Push. Annotate to see how the dad changes by the end of the story, and then do the lesson activities. Remember to use the 4 steps that I showed you here today, and take a look with step 1 in the middle and the end of the story. I think that will be very helpful for you. For Wednesday, I want you to read There's a Worm and do the lesson activity. You may have to rewatch the video on poetry to help you before you start this reading. We did this poem in class and it was very, very difficult for us. So please take your time, and if need be, come visit me during my office hours. This week it'll be Wednesday from 2 to 3 and Thursday from 2 to 3 if you have any questions about this reading. On Thursday, I want you to complete writing task number 3. Try your best to use topic sentences, transition words, evidence from the text, and analysis. This is our last writing task of the year, so please show off so I can talk about how great you've developed over the course of these last few weeks.